Hi, my name's Andrew Hewitt. I'm a hand bookbinder, conservator, and book artist in Toronto, Ontario, and I'm going to be teaching the long stitch book for ARLIS for their upcoming conference. I just wanted to show you the book, some of the materials, and give you a chance to get familiar with things before we start the workshop. The long stitch book comes from the 13th through the 16th century. We're going to be doing one with kind of household supplies or things that are going to make it easier. If you have some, you can use a cereal box for the exterior for the book, which should be fun. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in and we'll look at some of the tools and materials we're going to be using so that you're ready for the workshop. First, I'm going to show you some of the tools that I have here in my shop. If you have access to an art department or your own craft supplies, you might have some of this stuff on hand already. One of the first things I like to start with is a bone folder. So a bone folder is just a piece of bone that helps you kind of score and crease materials. So it's just going to make it a lot easier. Bone folders are pretty inexpensive. You can find them at most of the craft stores and art stores, or you can find them online. If you don't have a bone folder, that's okay. You can use something like this kitchen knife. Basically something that's smooth and isn't going to cause trouble, is going to help give you a little more leverage and allow you to do the creasing we want to do. Next, you're going to want to make sure that you have on hand something to cut with. So it might be kind of one of your standard craft knives, it might be an X-Acto knife or an Olfa knife. Any of these are going to work just fine. Make sure you have a nice sharp blade because that'll make your cuts nicer. And that's going to help us with some of the intricate cutting we're going to be doing on the cover itself. I also want to make sure that I have pre-punched the holes. So it's nice to pre-punch the holes in the paper. It just makes the sewing process easier and more accurate. If you have access to one of these pottery tools with a little needle mounted in a handle, that's going to work just fine. You can get more fancy ones. I might even just get myself a needle and kind of shove it into a cork or wrap it with tape so that you can use it for kind of poking through layers of paper. We're going to be sewing our books together, so we're going to need a sewing needle. I like to find ones like darning needles or bookbinding needles with large eyes, just to make it a little bit easier on me to get the thread on there. The thread we're going to be using, if you have access to it, is an Irish linen thread. And so Barbora is one of the kind of the traditional ones. It comes in a variety of colors and a variety of weights. Whatever you can find is probably going to work just fine. These are 18-3 threads, so it's the thickness or the gauge is 18 and 3 are the number of strands that sew it together. So if you don't have access to something like this, I might even go with something like a good dental floss, because that's nice and strong and it's already pre-waxed, so it's going to make your life a little bit easier. Now, I don't usually wax my thread, and in fact, if you find linen thread that's been waxed already, it's often kind of really big and cakey, and so it's a little harder to work with. So I try to find the unwaxed, and if I'm going to, I'm just going to apply just a little bit of beeswax on the outside, and I'll show you that during the workshop. Now, I think that's really going to cover most of the tools that we need. You're going to want a pencil as well. That's going to come in handy. And some sort of a ruler. I like these metal rulers because then I can cut along the edge if I need to. But any ruler is going to help us do the measuring. You're going to need a little bit of scrap paper as well, just for measuring things and making sure everything's working okay. Now, we need some materials as well. So kind of the easiest option probably is going to be just some regular photocopy paper. We're going to cut this down to make it kind of the pages that we're going to be working with. And so we'll do that. This photocopy paper is okay, but it's a little bit thin. So I often like to default with something that's a little more sturdy, a little nicer to work with. If you're looking for a nicer material, what I often do is just buy drawing pads. And this is an 18 by 24 one. that I can cut down to whatever size and directions I want, so you can really customize the size of your book. You can also buy lots of decorated and lots of colored papers at places like Michael's, some of the craft stores. Any of these papers that you find there is going to work just as well. And you can get a wider variety of colors and options. The craft stores are also going to have a heavier weight card if that's what you want to use for your cover. So they have a text weight paper, the thinner, and then they have the cover weight paper or cardstock. So I could use cardstock for the exterior and the text paper for the interior. Now what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be cutting up one of my son's cereal boxes. This is nice and thick, it's going to be nice and sturdy, and it's going to make for a fun cover on the outside. So just see if you can get a hold of one of those in the next few weeks, and then we can use that for the cover. If you use the cardstock for your cover itself, I would reinforce it. So we can use a piece of this thin solid core cardboard as a reinforcement, just to make sure everything works well and nothing tears. Or you can default to something like this, which is Tyvek. Tyvek is a spun polyester material. You can find it in any of the office supply stores as these Tyvek envelopes, or you can always just run by the post office and see if they have one sitting in their mailing supplies. I usually use this on the inside so that I don't kind of have this white sticking outside the book. It makes it a little nicer. We'll cover what you can do for that and why you would do that in the workshop itself. One of the things that's good to know when you're working with paper materials is what the grain is. Grain is the alignment of the fibers within the piece of paper itself. It started out as a vat of water and cellulose fibers and was either sprayed onto a screen or pulled up through the screen or pulled up through the water. And so the grain is not something you're ever going to see. And in fact, they often put decorative marks on paper which kind of try to fool you. I always want to make sure that the grain is running from the top of my book to the bottom of my book, head to tail. Your pages are going to open a little bit nicer. They're not going to fight you so much. And although we're not going to use it for this book, it's good to know if you're gluing materials together as well. Now, in order to find the grain, what I like to do is a technique called the bounce method. So you can take your piece of paper, you can roll it over and see how much resistance you get when you roll it over. And then I'll do the same in the other direction. And so it's fighting me a lot more. I'm not able to kind of push it down as easily in this direction. So I'm going to say that the grain is running the long direction on this piece of paper. And I'll often put an arrow, which you may not see, there we go, or just a single line in the corner just to help me out. Now, all photocopy paper, almost all, is going to be running the long direction on the piece of paper, and so I know that I'm going to want to fold it. In the instructions, I just say to cut this in half so that we can have kind of a good sized page, and that's going to work just fine for me. If I'm working with one of the drawing pads or one of the sheets from the craft store, then you'll have to test the grain and then cut it to whatever dimensions you want. Now, in order to make this a book, I'm going to want to cut this paper down. And so I'm just going to line it up, and I'm going to grab my ruler. So this sheet is 11 inches long, so I can just make a pencil mark at the halfway point, which I hope is 5.5. There we go. So I have 2 pencil marks, I have a metal ruler, and then I have my knife. Okay. When I'm cutting materials, I really try to be careful. I hope that no one's going to cut themselves during the process of the workshop. And so what I do is I have a very particular technique for cutting that paper down. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put the tip of my blade on one of my pencil marks and move my ruler up to it. And then I'll get as close as I can, and then I'll put my tip of my blade on the pencil line on the other half. And everything's looking good. Now I'm going to use a lot of pressure on the ruler and very little pressure on the knife itself. It's when you're really fighting that it jumps off and cuts you. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to do my cuts. And I'm not going to let go of that ruler until I know I've cut through all the paper. So I'm still holding down really firmly with that ruler. It's hard to get back into the line that you've started cutting, so this is going to make your life easier. And so I now have a stack of pages that are ready to fold into my what are called sections or signatures. Now this photocopy paper is pretty thin, so I might go ahead and I might use 5 or 6 cut sheets in order to make my set of pages. If I was working with something from a drawing pad or some of this paper from Michael's, I might stick with 4 sheets to make your section. So again, 6 sheets if it's photocopy paper, 4 sheets. And I'll let you figure out kind of the math of how many you need to get all of the units that you need. We're going to be folding these sets of pages, and we're going to use multiple sections or signatures. So I have each of these little units that are going to be sewn side by side into the book itself. So let's go ahead and, if you can, go ahead and cut down all the pages to the size you need. Make sure that you have all the supplies that you need, and then we'll meet up for the workshop, and then we'll go through the folding, the sewing, any cutting we need to do to end up with our long stitch book. So I hope you'll be joining us during the ARLIS conference, and hopefully we'll see you then. Thanks a lot.